Egypt has more to teach the world than nearly any other country. It's been around longer and had more experience, and if you could measure it, more wisdom probably, and suffered more, loved more. The emergence of democracy, finally, I first went to Egypt in 1945, and I was in the Marine Corps, 1946. And the emergence of a democracy and the vitality and the daily lives of the people who live there in the last few years, and particularly after this improbable person so perfectly qualified for the presidency came up to, or down to Cairo to fill that office. Being there last year, late last year, I guess, visiting again with the families, hiding out and moving from time to time, every several days usually, arguing with officials about seeing President Morsi and other prisoners unsuccessfully, and the world standing, and particularly my own country, not only silently by, but providing the military government with billions of dollars to repress the people, subjugate. So the bright light of my experience with Egypt over all those years was the improbable election of this man to the presidency, and the goodness that he exuded in his short tenure. Egypt had lived with arbitrary government for millenniums, a long, long time anyway. Maybe off and on they had a break. And finally, with all the wisdom and culture and history of the country, what we used to call free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, free at last. We had an elected president who was a Democrat in the purest sense of the word, that he believed in the people, he came from the people, he was elected by the people, he served the people, he had no other purpose, no other desire. And to see him sealed off in a secret trial that, as far as I know, hasn't permitted any neutral outside observers. Maybe they didn't think I was neutral, maybe I wasn't, but they wouldn't permit two other lawyers that I went with, or myself, to even see him, much less witness the trial. A public trial being one of the essential preservations of the integrity of a judicial system and freedom of the people. We owe a lot to President Morsi, and his freedom is important, utmost important to not only the people of Egypt, primarily the people of Egypt, because they're the most immediately and directly affected. The hope for freedom on the planet and the strength of democratic institutions, it will enable us to live in harmony with the will of the people. It's hard to think of a greater hope for freedom, particularly in countries that's known so little of it. and achieving his freedom, and with it, hopefully, an admission or confession from those who imprisoned him that they had committed a terrible assault on the hope for democratic institutions and peace on earth by arresting and secreting away a leader that offered so much hope as a symbol and for the world, as a fact for the people of Egypt. I hope we can create a commitment from countries across the globe to put their maximum pressure and use their maximum influence on a very narrow-minded military leadership, if narrow-minded military leadership isn't redundant several times, to let him go for the good of the people of Egypt, for the honor of its government, and for the welfare of all of us. As a symbol of integrity in government and the risk it runs, Morsi is the brightest light at this time, beyond Egypt. And his freedom is essential to a strong belief that through the continuing struggle we shall overcome repression and live in peace with honorable government that never puts its heel on the necks of the people. So all the people who care about freedom on the planet have a stake in this matter, and freedom of the president, the elected president, taken away from office by force, and meeting with his family just 7 or 8 months ago. Their courage, their dignity, and their hopes, but this is more than a family matter, it's a global matter. And I hope all who have any possibility of influencing the matter, that can hear my voice or independently act, to do everything within their power to see that President Morsi is freed and returned to office, not just for the well-being of the people of Egypt, but for the planet, and for respect for the idea of democratic institutions.